The recent leak of highly classified Pentagon documents is being labeled as a nightmare for the Five Eyes intelligence network. The leaked documents reveal that the US was spying not just on Russia, but also on its allies, including Ukraine, Israel, and South Korea. Hardly surprising, as the US has a long history of spying indiscriminately against its friends and foes. To understand this complex history and the implications of the latest Pentagon leaks, we are joined by Ray McGovern, a veteran former CIA intelligence analyst for 27 years. This is not the first time we have seen such leaks, Ray. How critical are these leaks, in your opinion, and who could be behind this? What's your hunch?
Well, at this point, there's so much contradictory and other information out that it's really hard to tell. But I think one has to proceed from the cui bono perspective. Who profits from these leaks? Two things. One, that being the case, and two, the New York Times, Washington Post, deciding to publish these things. Now that's big. They could have suppressed it, just as they have suppressed many key stories for several years at a time. But they decided to publish this one. Now, why? I believe that Ukraine may be at the bottom of this. In other words, the issue of Ukraine. I believe that it could be that some senior policymakers in the Pentagon at the highest reaches of the Department of Defense have decided, this is a fool's errand in Ukraine. Maybe we ought to get out the truth. Maybe we ought to expose people like Joint Chiefs of Staff Chief Milley and Secretary Austin for the lies they have told about Ukrainian progress and the Russians being just pulverized. And maybe that will stop this widening of the war, because this spring is critical.
Is the US a reliable ally? Why haven't we seen any strong reactions from Ukraine, South Korea, and Israel yet?
Well, when you talk about the U.S. allies, they're really U.S. vassals. The relationship is very, very uneven. The U.S. calls the shots. The U.S. shares the bulk of the information with the allies. As far as the U.S. as being a reliable ally, every nation looks to its own interests. Some nations, when they conclude an agreement, stick to it. The history of the United States since the fall of the Soviet Union, when we promised not to extend NATO 1 inch to the east. Well, there are 31 countries in NATO, and half of those were incorporated into NATO after that promise, and they're all many more miles than 1 inch to the east. So some countries make promises and then don't abide by them.
The leak is being described as the nightmare for the Five Eyes intelligence network. What is the driving factor for the Five Eyes network?
Well, the Five Eyes, of course, are the English-speaking people that decided after World War II that they would all share information. You got the U.S., you got the UK, you got New Zealand, you got Australia, you got Canada. Well, it is sort of a privileged group. It's sort of like one of those fraternities up at Yale University. You got to really know somebody to get in. But it's a more general, it's a wider question now. People refer to the collective West. The collective West says that Russia is isolated. Right, okay. We have the collective West, which I call the lily white West. Look at NATO. What's the distinguishing characteristic? All white. So you have the collective West against the rest of the world, really, now. People of color, 80%. China, 1.4 billion. India, 1.5 billion, Indonesia, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Brazil, for God's sake. So it's not really Russia that's isolated. It's the United States has isolated itself, and the Five Eyes are the epitome of that. And so this is a very unhealthy situation.